Well, let's hope that we are now very literate in the conference too, not only.
All right.
All right. So
Maybe I can welcome you all to the conference then. My name is Heather Gladhead, for those of you whom I haven't met yet. I'm the resident here. I was talking to Joanna. We were talking about Oahu being known as the gathering place, the meaning of the word Oahu. So I thought if I was going to say that to you, I would then look it up. Well, it doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't have a meaning. Oahu means
check the table.
It has come to mean gathering place. So the millions around the world, everyone is gathered here. And we gather, most people come to partake of the climate. They come to Hawaii. Dr. Wolf said. And there is a climate here, but not only the beautiful climate we see, but it is the climate of aloha. And when I say aloha, aloha no, it means a lot of aloha. And the Hawaiians do call this land the land of aloha. So we're here to gather in aloha. And the theme of the conference is, we'll find out. But I would like to really like to know how gathering is here. It's only me. It's a very loving blessing that you're here, Dr. Hora and all of you. So I'd like to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. And certainly we are very grateful for the generous hospitality that you have extended to us. And somebody said to me before we left that on Hawaii, all the Hawaiians smile. And that's true. You must have been calling around to tell them to smile. So let's try to think a few moments about the theme. Do we really know what we know, and do we really see what we see? Now, existential metapsychiatry is about learning to see. Now, this may come as a surprise that a discipline which is concerned with issues of mental health and all its ramifications, just as general well-being, creative living, intelligent living, with being productive, with a meaningful life, freedom, with integrity and authenticity. In short, with a fulfilled, healthy, wholesome existence, is concerned with learning to see. Do our problems, our diseases, our anxieties, fears, sense of lacking something, frustrations, coping with drinking or eating problems, have something to do with seeing? That is what we will explore now. Are we not seeing now? Are we not knowing something now? Is the fact that we experience problems in some areas an indication that we are not seeing correctly, and that our understanding and knowledge is somehow invalid? These are the questions for our discussion today. Now, our knowledge and seeing have come under severe scrutiny lately. Many scientists of various persuasions are offering viewpoints that are startling, if not downright mind-boggling, with regard to the correctness of our seeing. For years, Now, we have been hearing from physicists ever since Einstein that our perception of the physical universe is incorrect, or at least very limited. An expanded view of the natural environment is only slowly being understood, even by scientists and less by lay people, as most of us are. Now, more recently, there have been neurophysiologists, brain surgeons, who have raised questions about what we see and what we know. It is Dr. Brown, for instance, who suggests that all along, man has been looking at things through lenses that change things so that we can understand them. It's more like seeing a sample of what really is there. He suggests. But we are not actually seeing what is there. He says, if we saw reality without our lenses, we would know a world without time and space, just events. Our lenses construct a physical reality by giving certain rationale to frequencies from beyond time and space. Now, this begins already to sound beyond our ordinary comprehension. I will quickly stop with that. However new and startling these suggestions are, they are not new, and they are not the first to discover that there is something amiss with the way we see. This has been a recurring theme in the teaching of Jesus. Jesus would say of his audience, seeing they see not, and hearing they hear not. He would quote from Isaiah, who said, this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. Obviously, he was keenly aware that what he knew and saw and tried to explain fell on deaf ears by his audience. Often he expressed his frustration with this problem, and often he referred to there being a gap between the truth that he actually saw and what his students perceived. Others have made a discovery also, sometimes for themselves, as in the case of Job. Job was a good man, a religious, pious man. And he lost everything and experienced great suffering. And through this suffering, he came to understand something about the insufficiency of his religious knowledge. And he asked himself, who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore have I uttered that I understood not things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. Now there are other witnesses to these same things. Wherever we look in the literature of wisdom in the world, we find similar comments. The Delphi oracle of ancient Greece admonished the seekers of its counsel to know thyself. Again, there is a reference to knowing something. Is the oracle suggesting that perhaps we don't know ourselves? Now, there seems to be a double problem. First, as in Jesus' saying, and also in the discoveries of the scientists, it seems that we are not seeing the whole picture. What we know and what we see is limited in some way. But there is another problem. If we are not aware of these limitations, then we tend to take what we know and what we see as the whole truth, as the whole picture. And this knowledge becomes a blinder. Then we need first to be made aware of this blinding knowledge. For instance, you might have been thinking that you were coming to the conference, and now you found out you only came to Hawaii. I'm glad we discovered this as a blinding knowledge before we started it. Now, this seems to be the most difficult aspect of our issue, the issue that we are facing today. It is the knowledge that is limited, but which is accepted as the entire truth. The Greeks called this knowledge hybris, which means intellectual arrogance or self-confidence based on limited knowledge. St. Paul called this knowledge a high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God, and which must be cast down. It's simply what we would call being stuck up with what we know. That's what it comes down to. Of course, when we put it that way, we all know, we are all familiar with it. We have seen people who come in on a job and think that they know it all. Everyone can see that this attitude is not only foolishness, but also prevents them from learning. This hybris, or false knowledge, is an obstacle, obviously. A simple incident may illustrate this very clearly. I was brought home recently to a gentleman who was given notice that he had to renew his driver's license at the local Department of Motor Vehicles. So he went there and he took the written test and he failed. And the clerk gave him a new one and he failed again. When he told the clerk that he certainly would pass the third time, he was told that he could not take it the third time. He would first have to go home and study, and can come back another day to take it another time. So at home, he considered what the meaning was of this failing. And he discussed the incident with Dr. Hora. And Dr. Hora asked him, now if you would have known that you didn't know the answer to the test, would you have failed? And he said, of course not, I would have studied. It's a very simple test. Anybody can do it. But he thought he knew it, and he didn't study, and so he failed. Here we have a simple example of how our knowledge becomes an obstacle. We can now appreciate that the first requirement for any learning or understanding is to know that we don't know. We hear this expressed, but we may not always take that seriously. For instance, in the words of the Chinese sage, Lao Tzu, he says that he who knows doesn't know. But this gentleman certainly found out. And this again is also put, and we may appreciate that better, by Socrates, who says that the knowing of his not knowing is the beginning of wisdom. So here we have arrived at the heart of the issue of our conference. What is the nature of the limited knowledge, the incorrect knowledge And what is the meaning of it? And is there a way to know correctly? Now, to do that, to understand a little bit the meaning of our knowledge of the things that we think we know and see, and to understand a little bit that better, we may go to an analogy. An analogy here is offered by the philosopher Spinoza. He tries to explain something of the same sort as he suggests that we imagine a worm. It's not a very delicate analogy, but it makes it clear. And we imagine a worm. He said this worm lives in the cell of the blood of the body of a great being. It sees its cell as the whole of reality, and it would insist, if asked, that this view is the true one. But now suppose Spinoza says, we too are like that little worm, trying on occasion to look beyond ourselves, but most of the time living within the tiny corner of our universe, assuming that all the rest is or should be much the same. Now, what is the meaning of that analogy, or what is the equivalent of the worm's point of view to the viewpoint that we have? We are somewhat like this worm. In psychological thinking, our cell is called the ego. The psychological definition of the ego is that it is a coping mechanism, a mechanism of adaptation. A child in a human family develops a certain way of coping with the challenges and changes of life and learns to adapt. However, from the standpoint of metapsychiatry, the ego is something different. It's not a coping mechanism. And from the standpoint of metapsychiatry, we see the ego as a viewpoint. It is the viewpoint of the worm. Of course, if you are a worm, you want to cope with the environment and with other worms. You can even study the worm's ability to cope. That's called wormology. It's the equivalent of psychology on the human level. Psychology is a sort of a wormology. But there is more to the worm than his tiny corner of the universe, and it would be helpful if the worm knew something of the body of the being that he is a part of. But the worm doesn't see that. And he is not aware of that aspect of his being. He's only aware of himself and his tiny corner. Now, if he at least knew that that his knowledge is limited and incorrect, he might even become an enlightened worm. So what does this viewpoint of the ego consist of? We say the ego is a viewpoint. What does that really mean? The ego is aware of two things: images and experiences. And from our ego point of view, the way we see and think is in images and in having experiences. First, there are images. We form ourselves an image. If we are going to a conference in Hawaii, we inevitably form ourselves an image of what it would be like there. We form an image of everything in advance, and we hold on to them if they were pleasant later, or we try to repress them if they were unpleasant. In this manner, we form also an image of ourselves. Now, what is an image? An image is usually carved by hand or drawn. And the image of ourselves is not made by hand, but by the mind, by thought, by knowledge. And as we grow older, that image becomes stronger and larger and all demanding and more insistent. And the philosopher Krishnamurti said of that image, the more you listen and act and have your experience, your existence in that image, the less you see. Now the second is experience. We experience all the time things. Now what do we experience? So anybody that already knows what we experience? Right, our images. We may not know that, but all that we experience is what we have imagined so far. We experience what we imagine. The images of our daily struggles become the everyday life experience. Now, Dr. Hora observes in the dialogues that it may come as a surprise to us that we do not live in reality. We experience our thoughts about reality. And he continues, an experientially oriented man cannot see reality in its full dimension. The more unenlightened we are, the more we use our feelings as criteria of reality. But anyone who has seen a hypnotist can see that one can feel anything he suggests. And it has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with suggested thought. So one student asked Dr. Hora in one of his lectures, it's on a tape, the tape called Thinking and Health. And he asked, do you mean to say that if I put my hand on a burning stove, that it wouldn't hurt? If I would think it doesn't hurt? And Dr. Hora answered by saying, yes. You have learned to feel pain through education. If a hypnotist would put you under hypnosis and suggest that you don't have pain, you would not feel pain when you put your hand on the burning stove. And that has been proven all along. We all know about these things. Therefore, experiences are purely subjective. And they are entirely unreliable. The aches and pains and the stresses and strains of everyday living, they seem very real to us. But they are only representing our subjective viewpoint. Yet we spend most of our time dealing with these experiences, trying to manage and control them. In dialogue, Dr. Hora says, an enlightened man is forever thinking about his feelings and sensations, his life in the body, his clothes, his food, his drink, his emotions, his possessions. And we may add his relationships and what others think of him. So in conclusion, we may state that we form ourselves in images and experience accordingly to the images we have formed. Recently, a physicist made the remark that as part of our education in Newtonian physics, we tend to think in pictures. However, he said, if we want to understand the new physics, we need to learn to think without pictures. And the same goes for metapsychiatry, for us here. If we want to understand reality, we must learn to understand without making images and going beyond experiences. In existential metapsychiatry, Dr. Hora writes how important it is for mankind to understand what real life is. We all want to live life fully. And we do not know how, because we don't know what life is. The worm does not know anything beyond his tiny realm. And we cannot imagine or experience what life is. Period. Certainly not beyond our tiny realm. Beyond our ego-oriented viewpoint. Now there is, however, a modality of awareness which can be discovered and liberated. And it stands to reason, if we could understand in some way real life beyond our experience and image of it, that it would give us a different perspective also on our everyday life experiences in the tiny corner of our universe. So that is the point that we will consider now. What is the solution to this? And the solution to this, maybe there are already some that have an inkling in what direction the solution would go. Is there anybody here that can help me get further with this paper? The rest is experimental. Who has a suggestion to make in what direction we need to look for a solution to this incorrect knowing? Very good. Our experience. Yeah.
I have to start with.
Uh-huh.
I can't start with
Yeah.
reality. I start with my experience, and I need to get that.
Yeah.
For example, I was considering the meaning of having blessing
Yeah.
of life,
Yeah.
and because it was a demonstration of abundance in my life. So I step back from the experience rather than seeing an idea and learn.
Yeah.
It has a spiritual.
It has a spiritual meaning, yes. So in other words, you try to look at it from another viewpoint. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. So it is clear maybe by now that the two questions raised by the conference, do we really know what we know, and do we really see what we see, is to be answered with no. This may come as a surprise to us, especially if we consider that this is universally true. It is, whether it is a highly respected scientist or an advanced, enlightened master, it is still no. Matter of fact, the more enlightened, paradoxically, the more enlightened one is, the better one knows that one doesn't know. We do not know and we do not see really what we see. That means that whatever we know and see, from the ego's point of view, is misguided knowledge. Now, where does this leave us? I don't want to stop in a depressed situation. Now, in this receptive state of mind, we have what the Bible calls the mind which was also in Christ Jesus. What kind of mind is referred to here? Asked Dr. Hora in Existential Metapsychiatry. And he quotes from Jesus' teaching, "What you hear from me is not mine, but the Father's. And I seek not mine own." In other words, by giving up the hubris, the false confidence, the limited knowledge that we have collected, we become receptive to the mind which fills the universe, the divine mind. And this is the creative mind and the source of all intelligent ideas. We abandon the mind of our own and yield to the mind that conceived us and continually maintains us. Dr. Hora states in Existential Metapsychiatry that we have to come to understand God as the mind of man. God is the Father mind. Now this brings us to a final conclusion. Just as the ego, in which context we initially find ourselves, is actually only a point of view, a way of looking at things, so also the understanding of God is a viewpoint, not a subjective viewpoint, not a viewpoint that someone has invented, but the viewpoint of truth, the truth. In metapsychiatry, we learn to think of God in an existentially valid way, and we define God as love, intelligence. So it follows that in order to know what life really is, we need to turn away from images and experiences and seek the viewpoint of love, intelligence. Now, a simple example from one of our students may clarify this. A mother had considerable trouble with her teenage son, and she came upon the idea to spend some time in the evening writing a letter and describing some good things she had seen that day, especially in regard to the boy. After a few days, she began to notice that the boy was more pleasant and was around the house a great deal more. Now, what had happened? She had changed her viewpoint. She had shifted her viewpoint from that of an image of a troublesome boy and concomitant troublesome experiences to the viewpoint of love, intelligence. You see, there is always considerable confusion about what love is, but it becomes very simple when we see it as a viewpoint. The Bible says God is love. There is also confusion about what God is. And it follows to see God also as a viewpoint. The viewpoint of love. The Bible speaks of God as a spirit, and we speak in ordinary language of looking at something in the spirit of this or that. The Spirit of God is the outlook, or the way of looking, or state of consciousness of love. Therefore, as it was said in the beginning, metapsychiatry is about learning to see. It is not too difficult to be enlightened, as Dr. Hora has always maintained. It is difficult to be interested in it. We can see this perhaps more clearly now. It is difficult to admit that all our knowledge is that high thing that has to be given up for the humble receptivity which makes us ready to see from the viewpoint of God, omni-active love intelligence.
It seems that our knowledge actually is made up of what become preconceived ideas or images. And those are very difficult. Many of us would like to be free from our preconceived ideas, and yet we don't know how to empty our minds of these things. How do spiritual values help us to become free of those images?
Yes. Well, it is absolutely impossible to empty our minds because it would take an ego to get rid of the ego. The content of our minds actually constitutes our ego. Now, if you want to empty your mind, you have to resort to a second ego to get rid of the first ego, but then you still have an ego, you see? So all meditations which endeavor to achieve emptiness through sheer willing it, or through some kind of a technique of breathing or counting, etc., do not really succeed. Fortunately, of course, there are aspects of reality which are unimaginable. Like, for instance, spiritual values. We cannot form images of spiritual values, spiritual ideas, and spiritual qualities. Also, in metapsychiatry, we value very highly the idea of love intelligence as a synonym for God. Now, nobody can form an image in his mind of love intelligence. Nobody can paint a picture of love intelligence. It is impossible. Therefore, by focusing our attention on love intelligence and its existential manifestation, we find that all imagery disappears from consciousness. Now, and that way, we can attain a certain emptiness, what the Zen Buddhists speak of emptiness, which means being free of calculative thoughts and imaginary thoughts and fantasies and concepts, and reaching a state of peacefulness in consciousness.
Dr. Hora, there is a story of a student of Zen who is said to have exclaimed at the moment of his enlightenment that the bottom of the bucket had fallen through. Does this story have any significance for the topic of our conference here? In relation?
Yes, this is a very helpful story. It describes a student of Zen who, in the course of meditation and study and training, reached a point where she spontaneously exclaimed, "The bottom of the bucket has broken through." Now we understand this to mean that this individual suddenly became aware of the fact that all mental content has left her, and that she has become completely available for inspired wisdom reaching her from the cosmic mind. Now, if you imagine a bucket, and if you imagine that you knock out the bottom of this bucket, what will you get? You'll get a funnel, don't you?
Yes.
The result is a funnel. A funnel is something that lets everything through and doesn't hold on to anything. You cannot accumulate knowledge, information, fantasies, and imaginings in a funnel, like in a bucket. Yeah. So unenlightened man's consciousness could be compared to a bucket, which is constantly being replenished and filled and kept full with images and fantasies and concepts and preconceived ideas. Now, enlightened man lets go of these things, and as a result of that, he becomes an open funnel or a channel through whom inspired wisdom, love, intelligence freely flows. And such an individual is spontaneously wise, loving, and responsive, and always capable of dealing with life in an appropriate fashion.
A funnel receives and expresses.
Yes. Allows things to get expressed. Yes. Right.
So we need to become a total consciousness.
Right. It's a very nice way of speaking about the enlightened consciousness as a funnel consciousness. There are all sorts of phrases being used, like being a transparency or being a channel. Yeah. Or being radiancy. Yeah. But the funnel is just it's really wonderful. Yeah. To help us understand the essence of enlightenment. Yeah. As being an unimpeded funnel through which the wisdom and the love of God flows freely into the world.
It's a better symbol, actually, because it also has the aspect of expressing.
Well, the funnel actually doesn't do anything.
Right, yeah.
It just lets it through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds very scary, Dr. Hora. Where's our security when we have to let go of all those things which we are holding on to?
Yes.
That we value so much.
Right. Well, if you value and you build your security on the contents of your accumulated information in the mental filing cabinet, you are in a bad way. That kind of security interferes with intelligent living and is always very precarious, of course. Now, the question, however, is wherein lies our sense of assurance or peace? It lies in the awareness of the fact that this funnel is constantly being filled with love and with intelligence. So love intelligence is the foundation of our security and of our sense of peace, assurance, gratitude, love, freedom, and joy. That is real security, because the other is just a very precarious sense of security. It's really delusional. The unenlightened sense of security is a delusion, because it's based on fantasies and imaginings.
Then the experience of anxiety, which is so common to human experience, really is the meaning. The meaning of the anxiety is that the security we try to live on.
Right. You could say that anxiety is a sort of a premonition that maybe the content of our consciousness will not adequately protect us from surprises, or from the unexpected. Perhaps we are not sufficiently equipped with knowledge and wisdom to cope with the unknown, what life will throw at us any moment. So that kind of security, and that is also explains how people cling to the known and are afraid of the unknown.
I was just thinking that one of the most common psychiatric diseases now written up in the paper all the time is called agoraphobia, which is the fear of going out of one's tiny confines of the house.
Right, right.
And that would seem to be a symptom of
Yes.
of false reliance somehow.
Yes. All phobias are based on an erroneous assumption that one should be able to control the contingencies of life through personal knowledge and personal mind power. And certainly agoraphobia indicates that if an individual is confronted with an open space where unexpected things may happen, then this individual may not be able to cope or respond appropriately with the surprises which life holds, and that is this phobia, this tremendous fear of losing control, or driving a car or anything. So, but if we achieve the great blessing of funnel consciousness, then there is no fear, because there is a sense of assurance that God provides us with the necessary wisdom to respond appropriately to any unexpected situation that may come along.
As disease and anxiety are indications that we are keeping the bottom.
Keeping the bottle.
The bottom.
The bottom.
The bottom.
Yeah.
There.
Now it's interesting to consider the relationship between faith and PAGL, faith and funnel consciousness.
Too well.
Now, so many religious people find their security in having faith in God. And of course, that is better than nothing, because there is part of the truth in it. But faith can also be blind faith, and most of the time it is blind faith. Now, our faith which is blind is a faith which is not based on understanding, but sort of an emotional self-assertiveness and wishful thinking. And such faith, the security of such faith is still not sufficiently secure, because at any moment it can fail. Now, funnel consciousness is not synonymous with faith. It is based on a higher level of awareness, which man is capable of attaining through meditation and study. And that awareness is synonymous with realization. A funnel consciousness is based on God realization. Therefore, such an individual has no need to have faith in anything. His security is based on awareness, on a clear, realized awareness that love intelligence is infinite and omnipresent and absolutely reliable.
Actually, then in faith, the bucket is still filled with various fearful ideas and so forth, and in a sense, faith is just another part of the content that you try to make come first, but it may not be strong enough.
Yes, it's filled with religious ideas. Now, the funnel conscious individual is beyond religion.
Yeah.
To him, God is not a religious symbol or a system of images. To him, God is an existential reality.
Although faith goes, they say you go by faith, as if it goes by the unknown.
Yes, right.
So if you say that awareness takes place,
Yes.
then we are not really going by an unknown.
Right. The unknown has become knowable,
Yes,
but not intellectually,
right.
not conceptually, not in images, not in fantasies, but in realized awareness.
Yes.
There's a higher level of attainment of consciousness. Human consciousness is capable of reaching spiritual awareness. And that's what we call funnel consciousness.
There's neither the known nor the unknown.
Right.
Now, Dr. Hora, it doesn't seem very exciting, this funnel consciousness. And boring is the word that comes to mind. Isn't it rather boring?
All right, if you think it's boring, let's try to find out what boredom is. What do you think is boredom?
Oh, it's not exciting when nothing's going on.
Could any one of you define boredom?
It's the opposite of excitement.
Well, that is true, but it is more helpful to define it as a desire for excitement. A desire for excitement. Now, if you have a desire for excitement, then of course, funnel consciousness is not for you. Funnel consciousness is not fun consciousness. And of course, people who are very much hung up on excitement seldom study metapsychiatry. But the question is, what's so good about funnel consciousness that it would outweigh the fun of excitements and exciting life? Well, we have to understand that excitement is a counterfeit form of happiness. And whatever is a counterfeit, it means that it is illusory, and everything illusory has a flip side. And so it is not possible to enjoy excitement without ill effects, eventual ill effects, and certainly the exciting life is a pleasure-seeking life and a sensual life. Excitement is essentially based on sensualism. And you know that sensualism is the first of the 5 gates of hell. It means that inevitably it leads to suffering. Now, when a sensualist has suffered enough, he may become interested in funnel consciousness, and then he may discover that there is real happiness, which is a possibility for man to attain. But real happiness is not exciting. Real happiness is quiet joy. And in metapsychiatry, we call it PAGL, which is an acronym for peace, assurance, gratitude, and love. Would you trade excitement for quiet joy?
Right now, it sounds good.
I can see that some people you say,
Yeah.
and it has been said, that it leads to a perfect life, and that perfection is something more. Perfection is not interesting.
Yes.
And obviously we have maybe a misunderstanding.
Right. When unenlightened individuals speak of perfection, they really mean perfectionism.
Oh,
Perfectionism.
Yes. Now, what is the difference between perfection and perfectionism?
are you trying to always make something perfect? We're trying to make it that way?
Right. Perfectionism is a human effort at putting God out of the business. Producing something perfect through human effort, which is a self-confirmatory striving, fraught with infinite amount of frustration and pride and frustration and exertion. And it's never satisfactory. But true perfection is the spontaneous manifestation of divine love intelligence in its creative expression. And that is truly beautiful and awe-inspiring. When you see a beautiful flower or a tree in its perfect unfoldment, as the saying goes, man could never make a tree, right? No matter what an artist one is, it is impossible for man to really produce perfection, no matter how good he is at his craft. But God manifests himself in creativity and whatever, as the Bible says, whatsoever he doeth is perfect. Nothing can be put to it nor taken away from it.
It just dawned on me for the first time that perfection then is not something way at the end of the road when I would finally be completely enlightened, but that when those moments unfold, when inspired ideas come, when something just unfolds harmoniously, that's actually perfection.
Of course.
I thought it was way ahead.
Perfection cannot be done, but it can be allowed to happen.
And it happens all the time.
All the time, whenever nothing is interfering with it. Yes. That's perfection, and that's beautiful and happifying perfection, to be aware, to be able to discern God's perfect handiwork is happifying.
It reminds me that you know people that are perfectionists.
Yes.
They are terribly boring.
Yes. Often even aggravating.
And now someone with subtle consciousness
Yes.
would allow perfection to manifest.
Right, exactly.
And that is interesting.
Of course. It's a joy. That is a joy. It is an inspiration.